It sounds to me like I don't need to convince you about the power of financial literacy. It sounds to me like you've convinced yourself already. You're as much a businessman and a money man as you are a professional athlete.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, then this is the thing my uncle told me. It's like, what makes you happy? Some people, cars make them happy. And so they buy a lot of cars. Like my uncle was
Mm.
like, I like watches. So he buys watches. So when I thought about like what makes me happy, like my dad, when I first came in the league, he was like, hey man, like you ain't gotta get an apartment that's 1900 a month because you know Seattle's expensive and that's really you look at Seattle. And he's like, you can get yourself some 3,000 a month or 4,000. I'm like, nah, I'm good. And he was like, you can live like a king a little bit. Like you don't have to just be frugal. But my whole mindset was like, I'd rather live like I'm broke now to live like a king later. Because when I'm done, I want to make
Boom.
sure, yeah, like when I'm done, like I'm not gonna be getting all this money that I was getting unless I get a really, really big time job or something. So I have to learn how to go from spending what I'm spending now to if I'm making 60,000, 80,000, 100,000, I know how to do that. But what I love to do is I want to travel. You know,
Right.
if I want to start traveling and going places when I'm done playing, I want to save as much money as I possibly can. So that way, like I could go travel with my family and we could go to Arizona or we can go out the country and stay there for a week or two because a week or two stay might be $5,000. But guess what? Like I'd rather do that than spend $50,000 on a chain.
What's the biggest financial literacy lesson you think you learned in your early life growing up? And what's the biggest mistake you made in your adult life?
Uh, I think the biggest lesson I learned started off when I worked in my junior year in high school. And when I say lesson, I'll just say it taught me very early how to appreciate money. So when I worked at Jiffy Lube growing up. So say I made like $700. I learned how to
Right.
appreciate that money that I made because in high school that was a lot of money. So
Right.
like I could have $700, and if I put $400 in a bank, I still kept 300, and I learned how to manage that all the way to zero.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay.
like, if there was a lesson, I learned how to appreciate what was right in front of me. And for me, I learned the ideal of saving because at the end of my year at K State, I'll look at my bank and I have $2,000, and that's
Mm.
from the summertime all the way until the end of the year. And I would have $2,000. And so I learned how to be able to give money to people who might have needed it back at home or whatever in situations. But I also learned the value of saving money and just keeping it when I actually need it to be used rather than how I want it to be used.
No, that's a very and that you're still using that same lesson today. You went from talking about $700 to talking about $700,000 to talking about $7 million. But when I'm hearing you use the same math in every situation, and you're still talking about that 10%, which is the flake off money. It's just the 10% has just gotten larger as your income has grown. So that's really smart. And you say you don't budget. It's really funny, man. You've been budgeting since you were in middle school, from what I'm hearing.
Man, it's all mentally. But I mean, it comes down to, do I take 15% out, 20% out? Like, I don't think about it. I just pick a number and take it out. But at the end of the day, where I'm at now in my life, I'm learning how to allow myself to start moving away from that broke mentality to
Right.
starting to allow myself to progress through starting to learn how to live like a king.
Have you learned the lesson yet that you can't take everybody with you, that you can't finance everybody's life, you can't save other people no matter how much you're trying to help them? That ultimately, it's the James Brown version of affirmative action. Open the door, I got to get it myself. Have you realized yet that even though you're making all this money, you're doing this well, you'll go broke trying to subsidize everybody's life you love?
Yeah, I've learned you go broke. I learned you go spiritually bankrupt if you try to
Mm.
save people in relationships. Like I've learned through all of this as a whole, it's just different situations that you have to learn how to love people in a way of helping them help themselves.
Let me ask you a quick question. As we begin to wrap up here, it's been very inspirational, man, being with you, uh, talking about life. It's just real talk. This real talk series is, I think, is going to help a lot of people. As we begin to wrap up, a couple questions. One is there almost everything we've been talking about is aspirational. I mean, it's just all good news. Has there been anything that happened that you're like, dang, I really wish I would have done that differently? Like that was a real mistake, and I wish I had to share this with somebody else so they don't make the same mistake. Or have you been blessed not to have that happen to you yet?
I would say to be, I've been blessed not to have that happen to me yet. But if there was anything that I wish that I could do better at, it's being able to like how I, went about helping give my bro a lot of money. Like
Mm,
if I could change how I went about it, I'd probably do it in a different way. But I had to learn how to say no.
you've come a long way, man, in 28 years, and you should be very, very, very proud of yourself. And I'm sure a lot of people who have been watching this are going to be really inspired by the way in which you're living your life, not what you're doing for a living, but the way in which you live your life. And financial literacy, economic empowerment are parts of the gifts, I think, that you have to give to this generation. So thank you very much from the Operation Hope family and the Experian family, which has inspired this conversation. We're partnering with them to help raise credit scores in communities that you and I care about all over this country, trying to get these communities. Most of our people, by the way, Tyler, 41% of all Black people, last time I checked, have a credit score below 620, which means you're locked out of the free enterprise system. You can't get a job because they check your credit. You can't get a good car loan, can't get an apartment, can't get a mortgage to buy a home. You can't start a business because they want a credit score that has at least a 700 on it if you're going to do a business loan. So you got half of Black people just locked out of free enterprise and capitalism because they don't understand how this game works. So we're working with Experian, try to get the credit score up. 50 points. We're changing in 50 points in 6 months, 120 points in 24 months. I mean, that changes somebody's life.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you for leaning in and giving back and for and giving us this time today. It's been precious.
No problem, man. Appreciate it and hope you like the conversation as much as I did.